Hey, what is going on, everybody? Welcome into the latest video. As I told you guys last time, today I am going to be doing my season predictions. What you guys are going to get from me is you're going to get the standings for each division. I'm going to give you guys my award predictions, my playoff predictions, and of course, who I think is going to win the Super Bowl. Before I dive into my divisional predictions, I just want to say what I did, my process of this. I do this every year when I do my season predictions. There's a great website if you guys have not tried it out yet. This is not sponsored by no means. This is just me talking them out a little bit word by mouth advertising. It's playoffpredictor.com. That you can literally pick the winner of each game from the whole 18 week schedule, and it kind of gives you a little bit more insight on how these teams could really go, because you don't really, it's easy to predict like who's going to win, who's going to be the playoffs, but until you actually pick each game, you're like, oh man, this team might have a rough year, or oh, this team actually has an easy schedule, I can see them winning. And to kind of give you an idea too, like what I do is the first time I run through, I just pick the games straight up, like who I think's the most talented. If they are the most healthiest, this is who would win this game. But I make my adjustments in my second and third one, because there's some teams where you're like, all right, this, like, you'll go through the first, say you went through like I did, you go through the whole schedule predicting on who will just win straight up if they're healthy. All of a sudden you're like at week 15 and there's a team with like 1 or 2 wins, and realistically they're going to have a little bit more. Even if it is like only a game or two more, they're going to have games that they just surprisingly win. I look at the Colts last year. The Colts beat the Chiefs, right? Who won the Super Bowl in like week 4. So like things like that happen, and I try to, well, as I get to that second and third round, kind of predict some surprises. Maybe look at their records and be like, all right, they're kind of due for a win. I could see them beating this team. So that's how it went for me. But again, I'm gonna go ahead and dive into this video. I'm going to start with the NFC. I'm gonna start with the NFC East, since they did win they went to the Super Bowl last year. So I want to start with their division and how I think it's gonna go. Number 4, I'm sorry, Commanders fans. I just think they're going to finish at the bottom of the division. It's Sam Howell. It's basically his rookie season. So unless he takes a tremendous jump into year 2, I really don't see the Commanders pushing the Giants and Cowboys and Eagles for this division. I do think it's going to come down to 2 teams. My number 3 team is the New York Giants. Now, I will say there was a time when I was going through my runs on Playoff Predictor where I actually had the Giants finishing as high as second place. I do think they got a defense. They got a unique offense with like a lot of speedsters, like death by paper cut wide receivers, and then they got the threat in Darren Waller, and then obviously they got Saquon, but they're going to need Daniel Jones to step it up more as a quarterback this year if they want to push the Eagles for the division. But spoiler alert, they did finish with a winning record. Just because they're in third doesn't mean I'm thinking they're a bad team. Second place, I do have the Dallas Cowboys, and then obviously, guys, I have my first place team as I do have the Philadelphia Eagles. Eagles and Cowboys, they battled for that number 1 spot. Usually the Eagles came up always on top, but there was a couple times where I had the Cowboys with a close record to maybe push for the division, but I just think the Eagles are a better overall team. Moving into the NFC South, this was an interesting one because I see 3 teams that could win this division. Now, my number 4 team is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It's interesting with Tampa because they have some really good players on both sides of the ball, but your team's only going to go as far as your quarterback will take you. So unless like Baker Mayfield is going to play like he did when he took the Browns to the playoffs, I really don't see much happening for Tampa Bay this year. Now, I have the third team as the Falcons. Again, I've had the Falcons push for this division title. It's not like it was a crazy difference between who I have as the predicting to win the NFC South and the Falcons. It's just I need to see more out of Desmond Ridder before I can crown him. But they got a nice team. They got some pieces on both sides of the ball. The Panthers are interesting to me because I could definitely see them pushing for the division. But I did have lost faith over the last couple weeks in that offensive line, and I wonder how the offensive line will hold up. DJ Chark is hurt right now. They have Adam Thielen. I like Jonathan Mingo, but it's kind of an unproven skill set of players in the passing attack for them. Hayden Hurst is okay, but it's not like they have like a legit threat as a receiver right now. And then that does lead me to the number one team. I'm going with the New Orleans Saints. I just feel like they are a safe bet. Derek Carr, by no means. People have probably heard me before. I'm not the biggest Derek Carr fan, but he's the most proven quarterback in the division. They have Michael Thomas healthy, Chris Olave. They have a nice set of tight ends. They got Alvin Kamara will be back after that suspension, but they still got Jamal Williams, and they got a lot of guys on the defense too. And they usually year in and year out have a very solid defense. So I think the Saints enter the season with a high floor, but I also wouldn't be surprised if the Panthers or Falcons make a run for this divisional title. Moving into the NFC North, this is a I think it's gonna. I don't necessarily think these teams like there's other divisions, right? Like like the AFC North. There's other like the AFC East. There's competitive divisions with really good teams. The North is like a competitive division with some solid teams where I could see any four of these teams coming out on top. So I'm just going to go ahead and go over this list. I got the Bears at number 4 just because they had the number 1 pick overall last year. Remember, they did trade it to Carolina. They still have some things they need to work on this roster, but if Justin Fields takes that big year 3 jump, I could see them winning the division. The Vikings, they just have a proven quarterback in Kirk Cousins. They got obviously Justin Jefferson. We'll see what Jordan Addison can do. And they got some pieces here and there on that defense. Packers have a potential of having a very good defense, and it's all about Jordan Love. I was a believer in Jordan Love when he entered his draft class. He's shown some good things throughout the preseason, but we'll just have to see if that carries over to the regular season for them. But overall, I'm buying the Lions, Dan Campbell hype. I like what they're putting together on their defense. I do have some slight worries about their depth on their offense, but I just think that they got some momentum for their team heading into the season, if you will. Now, I'll say this. When I ran this division through the playoff predictor, every single time I had a new order of how this division finished. I had the Bears winning this division in one time I went through it. And the last time I went through it, they were all within a game of each other. I had the Lions winning the division with a 9-8 record, and then I had the others with an 8-9 record. That's how close I think these teams are going to be. It's going to be coming down to 1 or 2 games this season for the NFC North. Moving into the last NFC division, it's going to be the NFC West, of course. And now this one was pretty easy for the bottom team, right? It's the Cardinals, right? Kyler Murray's out for a minimum of 4 games. We'll have to see when he's able to return. But even if Kyler does return, that roster is downright awful. And they're kind of just pointing to the signs that they're tanking to have a top pick next year. Now the Rams, it's like, they still got Matthew Stafford. Now, right before I was about to hop on and record this, it sounds like Cooper Kupp had a setback in his hamstring injury. Sean McVay called it a muscle strain. It's day to day. That's something he's already been dealing with. And if the hamstrings can linger throughout the season, that's not a great thing you want to hear for your fantasy football team if you have him. But for real life, he's like their only legit, no, not he is their only legit threat right now, a legit proven threat in that offense. And then we have to see if Matthew Stafford can stay healthy throughout the year. It's like, yeah, man, I can see Sean McVay getting the best out of this roster, but it's a very weak roster right now, and I don't know if their upper echelon players like Aaron Donald, Stafford, and Kupp are enough to carry them, even in a weak conference. My number 2, this might be a surprise just because how they've been playing, but I'm going with the San Francisco 49ers. Now, I will say this. So that means I have the Seahawks winning the division. Now, back and forth, I had the Seahawks battling for the number 1 spot. They were within a game of each other. I think sometimes they'd finish with the same record, but one of them would have the upper edge just because of how I picked the games throughout the season. But I'm going to go ahead and say this about the 49ers. This is just a gut feeling, right? Why do I feel like the 49ers could have a disappointing year? It's just like I feel like this whole quarterback situation, has kind of muddied the waters. You know, we'll have to see if Nick Bosa will be in the back on the team. You know, there all these people were talking about the deal was going to get done. Now Kyle Shanahan has basically admitted he could see Nick Bosa missing games to start the year, and if he misses games, I mean, obviously that defense still has players within it and they can deal with it. But Nick Bosa is a game changer, and that could end up costing you a game or two to start the year. So I end up leaning towards Seattle just because I like Pete Carroll and I like what they got up there, and I think they can have a right team in the right direction, and maybe take advantage of winning that extra game or two when if Bosa does indeed miss the start of the year. Now I'm going to go ahead and move into the AFC. I am going to go ahead and start with the AFC West like I did. I'll go ahead and start with who won the Super Bowl last year, who represented the AFC, which was obviously the Chiefs division. And this one was pretty simple, right? It's the Chiefs. So just kind of going through it. The Raiders, I'm not seeing it with their defense. I'm not the biggest believer in Jimmy Garoppolo, as it feels like he's going to be hurt at some point. Now, Aiden O'Connell did show some good things in preseason, but again, just because of how they look in preseason doesn't mean they're going to look like that in the regular season. Third team, I had the Denver Broncos. Now, the Broncos are an interesting team. Sean Payton, we'll have to see if he can rebound Russell Wilson. Most of the time, when their final record was kind of like a 7-10 record for me. I think one time I had them at like a 9-8, but in a stacked AFC, that's not even good enough to make the playoffs, especially when I talk about these other divisions in the conference. And then I got the Chargers, okay? Chargers are number 2. Obviously got the Chiefs number 1. But I will say this, the Chargers, just going through the schedule, they have a really good schedule where they can take advantage of it and maybe at least win one game against the Chiefs. They might be able to push for this AFC West title. And every time I did this, they were very close to winning the division. It's just that I always gave the Chiefs the edge, just because it's the Chiefs, right? Now, let's go ahead and move into this next division. I'm going to go ahead and speak about the AFC East, which is going to be a interesting division to see how this plays out. Now, the Patriots I got as the last place team. It's just because I just think obviously Josh Allen and Aaron Rodgers are a better quarterback than Mac Jones. In my personal opinion, I think Tua Tagovailoa is a better quarterback, and I always will give edges to quarterbacks. I really like the Patriots defense. If you guys haven't watched my top 5 favorite defenses, they're in the top 5 favorite defense video I had come out earlier this week. It's just I don't really trust what's going on with their offense, even though they brought Bill O'Brien in. Now, the Dolphins I have as a third place team. Now, before the Finns community gets upset about me, I'm going to go ahead and say this. Every time they finish with a positive record. The last time I had the go around on Playoff Predictor, they went 11-6 for me. But it's a stacked. I'm not trying to spoil anything for the playoff picture, but even though they went 11-6, spoiler alert, they didn't even make the playoffs because of how stacked the AFC is. Like, it's going to be crazy to see who represents the AFC come the playoffs because there's so many good teams, and every game's going to matter in this conference. So go ahead and round this out. I had the Jets as number 2 team. I have the Bills as number 1 team. I had the Jets and Bills flip-flop winning this division. I ended up leaning towards the Bills winning the division because they have continuity. I saw a stat earlier. I forget who posted it. I want to say it's the guy from Over the Cap, where the Bills have like the most percentage of players that were on their roster from last year on this year's team. So they have experience in the system. They have continuity with each other. They have that chemistry. And I just think, the Jets are going to have a good year, but at the end of the day, it's still a pretty young team. And that's a young team that's going to need to learn how to win games. So that's why I lean towards the Bills winning the division. AFC South, man, this is pretty straightforward, guys. Jaguars are the clear-cut top team. I have the Jaguars winning the division. Don't really have to talk about much, but as far as the rest of the division, I have the Titans at number 2 just because, at the end of the day, they still got Ryan Tannehill. They still got Derrick Henry. They signed DeAndre Hopkins, Treylon Burks. Like, if those guys can stay healthy, and with Mike Vrabel in that defense, they're going to be able to compete at least at the beginning of the year. My issue is I don't trust their offensive line. They have like one of the worst offensive lines in the league that doesn't bode well for opening up rushing lanes for Derrick Henry. And then if Ryan Tannehill gets hurt, it's more likely going to be Malik Jackson. And then or it's going to be Will Levis, one of their backup quarterbacks, and then it's just like if he gets hurt, then maybe Derrick Henry gets hurt. DeAndre's up there in age, so if those guys start to get hurt, their playmakers out of that offense. To me, it's like no matter how good your defense is, if your defense always has to be on the field, apparently it's going to catch up to them. Look at the Broncos and Colts defense last year. Both of those defenses were like top 5, top 10 defenses for like the first 12 weeks. And then the offenses just could never pick it up, and they just got tired, and they basically fell on their faces to end the year. So that's how I kind of see the Titans season going. Colts and Texans, they're just young teams with exciting quarterbacks. They're gonna have their games here and there. It's just they need a lot of work on their rosters, so I don't see them winning a lot of games this year. And I had a variety of finishes. Sometimes I had the Texans finish second in this division. Sometimes I had the Colts finishing the second division. But I just lean towards the Titans because I can see the Titans squeezing out some games to start the year if they remain healthy. Moving into the final AFC division, this is going to be, I don't know how, this division for me is the hardest for me to figure out. I'm going to kind of talk about them all at once. So I got the Bengals winning the AFC North. I have the Ravens coming in second, the Browns in third, and the Steelers in fourth. Now, every single time I ran these teams through Playoff Predictor, they all finished with a positive record. The Steelers, every time, was like 10-7, 11-6. They always consistently finishing with a winning record. So I could see any of these teams not only winning the division, I could see any of these teams making it to the playoffs. But usually the Bengals always came out on top for me because they have a really easy schedule when you go through it. I could see them winning a lot of games this year. Steelers are interesting, right? Because they've looked good in the preseason and they have a very soft schedule at the beginning of the year. Most of the time, I had them going like I can literally see them winning like the first. I'm trying to remember right, like their first like 5 or 6. I had them at like 6, 7-0. But then it's like you get to their back end of the schedule, they have some very tough matchups, and that's what usually end up dropping their record down. So it's gonna be interesting to see how this plays out. I can see any of these. All 4 of these teams have potential to have a solid defense. There's some questions for me about the Ravens defense though heading into the season. Very very banged up in their cornerback room. There's some questions on their defensive line. Browns got some playmakers on that defense, and then the Steelers are a top 5 favorite defense of mine heading into the year. Like I said, I'm going with the Bengals because of experience and Joe Burrow. Hint, hint at the awards section. I like with the Ravens. I think they can have a top 5 offense this year. So that's why I got them at the top. Browns, I could see them actually winning this division. I like what they have on both sides of the ball, and I like what the Steelers bring too. I mean, this is going to be it's the hardest division, I think, heading into the season. Speaking of awards, let's just go ahead and go over my awards quickly. My MVP of the year, I decided to go with Jalen Hurts just because he would have pushed Patrick Mahomes for the award last year if he didn't get hurt at the end of the year. So I picture him staying healthy, continuity within that offense. He's got Devontae Smith, AJ Brown, Dallas Goedert. He's got a variety of running backs, and the offense is going to flow through him. So as long as Jalen stays healthy, I see him winning the MVP. My offensive player of the year, I've been saying this all summer. I think it's going to be Ja'Marr Chase. For those that are unaware, I am a big fan of wide receivers that enter their year 3. They usually take a huge jump in their production. I mean, look at what Justin Jefferson did last year, right? So I think Ja'Marr Chase is going to be what Justin Jefferson did last year. Take that huge jump, have all the stats, and get all the accolades at the end of the year. So I have Ja'Marr Chase as the offensive player of the year. My defensive player of the year, I'm going with Micah Parsons. It is crazy the amount of stats that he has done in only 2 years in the NFL. Similar that now DNs can come in and make that impact, but all players all around the NFL, usually front offices want to see them take that next jump in year 3. Micah Parsons also entering year 3. I think he takes that next jump in his career with his development, and he goes and wins himself an award this year. Offensive Rookie of the Year, it's going to be interesting because, if one of these quarterbacks, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, or Anthony Richardson, come out of the gates hot, it's usually going to go to a quarterback, right? But I do think these quarterbacks are going to go through their bumps and bruises throughout the year. And then, you got Bijan Robinson there in Atlanta, but I'm going with Jahmyr Gibbs to win the Offensive Rookie of the Year. I've said this before. I've heard other people say it as well. He's basically going to be the Alvin Kamara of this offense. And there's not really, outside of Amon-Ra St. Brown, there's no really proven receivers in their passing attack. I like what Sam Laporta can bring as a rookie tight end, but Jahmyr Gibbs is going to catch the ball a lot. If he can, and if he does indeed catch the ball a lot, and he puts up the yardage, and he finds the end zone 7 to 10 times, I can see him easily winning this award. Defensive Rookie of the Year, this one's kind of like hard to see who's winning. I'm just going with the top guy, right? That was the top defensive player of that got drafted, which is Will Anderson. He's going to start from day one. I think he has a chance to be uber productive in his first year, and then if he can at least get to like 8 to 10 sacks, I really don't see anybody else in this class like putting up some crazy production, and I think he's going to at least put on par level production of a top 5 defensive player. And if he can get to double digit sacks, I think they're just going to hand him the award by the end of the year. Now, comeback player of the year, this is pretty simple. It's going to be Damar Hamlin. I mean, when you go from basically almost like dying on a football field, and not only that you survived that incident, but you are back playing football, like, yeah, you're the comeback player of the year. They're going to give it to him. An honorable mention I just throw out there, though, is Calvin Ridley. He got suspended for gambling, but people forget he had to walk away because he was dealing with some mental health issues. And if he's able to, when he walked away and then he suspended for the year and come back and be the player that he was just 2.5 years ago, yeah, he's definitely within worthy of conversation. But this is easily Damar Hamlin's award this year. Coach of the Year, I decided to go with Dan Campbell, just because the Lions could end up having a really good record, even though I talked about earlier about them possibly, having a rough record, like not a rough record, but like a 9-8, a 10-7 type of record to win the season. I'm sorry, to win the division. But that's my whole point. The Lions, haven't been to playoffs since they were there with Stafford, back in the early 2010s. And if I remember, I only believe they even won I think the Packers won the division that year. So it's like if they could win their first division title in a long time and get into the playoffs, I could see the media, giving him kudos for getting the job done. And then my GM of the year, I'm going with Duke Tobin. He's the Bengals, basically. He's not technically his title's not technically GM, but he's their GM, the Executive of the Year award, if you will. And the reason why I give it to him is I have the Bengals. Spoiler: basically, they're the number 1 seed in the AFC. And it's just because I think I like some of the moves that he did. People, he kept his linebackers. He's got that defensive line, but then even though they saw their starting safeties leave, he already had Dax Hill in the waiting, their first round pick from last year. And so it's like I feel like he's been able to replace some guys that left, and that defense is still going to be on par of previous years. And then the signing of Orlando Brown, right? If bringing Orlando Brown as left tackle, moving Jonah Williams to right tackle, is able to officially finally fix this offensive line and keep Joe Burrow upright, throughout the year. I think he's going to get some recognition for that by the end of the season. Moving into my playoff predictions, I'm going to go ahead and start with the NFC. Pretty simple here. I'm just going to run through the teams, right? Number 1 seed, Philadelphia Eagles. Obviously, if you're Jalen Hurts to win the MVP, you got to be on the number 1 seed. That's usually how it works out. Number 2 seed, Seattle Seahawks. 3rd seed, I had the New Orleans Saints. 4th seed, Detroit Lions. 5th seed, Dallas Cowboys. 6th seed, San Francisco 49ers, even though I said I could see them having a disappointing year, but it's a weak conference. And then the 7th seed is the New York Giants. Now, I had working through the seedings and predicting who would win those games. I had the Eagles versus the Cowboys, so we got a little divisional rivalry going on there. Now, in my head, I was like, man, the Eagles are the better roster. They should win this. But why do I feel like it might be the Cowboys' year, guys? I picked the Cowboys to win. I like what they got on their offense. Dak Prescott. They got good guys on the offensive line. I like what they have in the trio of wide receivers between CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Cooks, and Michael Gallup. Jake Ferguson, I think, could be a very solid tight end. And I like what Tony Pollard could bring on that offensive line. I'm sorry, from the running back position. So as long as that offense can stay healthy, their defense, to me, is a top 5 favorite defense entering the year. I think they could be able to create some turnovers, and I like what they got between Stephon Gilmore and Trayvon Diggs. So Man, I just had the sneaky feeling that I could see them maybe upsetting the Eagles and getting to the Super Bowl for what, the first time since the '90s. So I got the Cowboys winning, which I'm probably gonna regret within a month of the season. With that being said, moving on to the AFC. And again, this was such a hard thing to see. Like some of the teams I left out of the playoffs, I'm like, man, I can still see that team making the playoffs. But this is the list. One seed, I have the Cincinnati Bengals because I think their schedule is going to help them lead to that number one seed. Two seed, I have the Kansas City Chiefs. Three seed, I have the Jacksonville Jaguars. Fourth seed, I have the Buffalo Bills. Fifth seed, I have the Los Angeles Chargers. The sixth seed, I have the New York Jets. And then the seventh seed, I have the Baltimore Ravens. Now my AFC Championship game, I don't have the Chiefs in it, which is crazy. The Chiefs, what, they have been in the AFC Championship for like the last 5 years, but I got the Bengals versus the Bills. I know people talk a lot of crap on a little, not a lot of crap, but people always mention, oh, Josh Allen hasn't won the big one. Well, there's a quarterback I remember this happening to, right? His name's Peyton Manning. You remember his first 5, 6 years, he couldn't win the Super Bowl. People are like, oh, he's really good in the regular season, but he could never win. And then he finally won it in '06. And what was kind of cool about them winning that is, it was the second game they had to face, if I remember this right, the second game they had to face the Ravens, which was a team he struggled with against their defense throughout his early in his career. And then he also had to beat the Patriots to make it to the Super Bowl. Well, in order for this to happen, the Bills would have to face the Chiefs, right? The Chiefs have been a thorn in their sides. They had obviously that win in the final 10 seconds of that playoff game 2 years ago. And then they would have to go against the Bengals, who beat them in the playoffs last year. So wouldn't it be poetic justice for the Bills to not only they would have to face the Chargers in this scenario in the wild card, go on the road, upset the Chiefs in Kansas City, and then go on the road and upset the Bengals to get to the Super Bowl. Yes, I just like what the Bills have in their defense. I like what they have up front. They have a lot of loaded defensive front. They got Matt Milano in the middle, and they got some playmakers in the back end of that defense. And I still believe Josh Allen is one of the best quarterbacks in the league. And I'm interested to see how that offense will look this year between Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis, Khalil Shakir, Dawson Knox, Dalton Kincaid, James Cook. And it's just going to come down to that offensive line coming together. So, with that being said, obviously that means I got a Bills versus Cowboys Super Bowl. And as far as the winner, I'm going with my boy Josh Allen, guys. He gets the job done. I have the Bills over the Cowboys in the Super Bowl. We'll see if that's right, but that's just how I feel heading into the year. If you think I had anything wrong, guys, get in my comment section. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know who you think's going to make it to the playoffs and win the Super Bowl. As always, if you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. If you have not subscribed or followed me, make sure you go hit the follow or subscribe button, depending on which platform you're watching this on. And then as far as the upcoming content, guys, I am going to be on my normal fantasy football schedule with these videos like I did last season. So next time you'll see me is going to be Tuesday night. Tuesday nights I will be doing my top waiver wire picks, and then my top streamable defenses that are available on the waiver wire. It'll be the same format as it was last year. And then Wednesday evenings, you guys will be getting my top starts and sits heading into the week. So you guys will get 2 videos every week, Tuesdays and Wednesdays. I am thinking about maybe trying to go live on one of my platforms, maybe TikTok, maybe Twitter. I do Twitter Spaces, maybe I do something on YouTube. Still debating on that. Maybe some Sunday mornings I'll do that, or maybe sometimes on the weekends. I'm going to feel that out throughout the season. But if you guys have any suggestions, I'm always open to that. So yeah, you guys will hear from me again next Tuesday. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'll talk to you later. Enjoy your Labor Day weekend.